All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with our BFRDP application process webinar. Before we begin here, if folks wouldn't mind letting me know if you can hear me, that'd be great, just to make sure the audio is working properly. So if you wouldn't mind, if you can hear me, maybe chat into your chat box that you can hear me successfully. Audio okay? All right, great. I'm seeing a lot of positive responses. Wonderful. Great. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, I'm Kristen Aldrich. I'm with New Entry Sustainable Farming Project, and we're talking today about the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program application process, and in particular, diving a bit into Grants.gov. Just for a little more information about me, I am the National Technical Assistance Coordinator with New Entry. And New Entry Sustainable Farming Project received an Educational Enhancement Team grant from the USDA in order to support potential applicants of the BFRDP program. So along with our project partners, we are developing tools and resources to help applicants navigate the process of submitting a proposal. We're going to be reviewing the application process for BFRDP, going over the nuts and bolts of the process. But I do want to just say off the bat, if you encounter any technical issues when you do submit your Grants.gov application, we really encourage you to reach out to the Grants.gov technical support team, and we can provide information about that later on. And of course, we'd like to thank our sponsor, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. So taking a quick look at our agenda for the webinar today, we'll go through a quick technical orientation just of your Webex program here. I'll talk a bit about New Entry and who we are. We'll get into the Grants.gov process, and we'll spend some time on the Just-in-Time pilot, which is a new pilot program for the application process this year for BFRDP. We'll dive into the application package itself, and then we'll have plenty of time to show you some resources and direct you to other places with information, and have time for questions at the end. So for a quick technical orientation of your Webex program, this is just a quick snapshot of your menu bar. So you can hit return to get back to your main screen. You can click the audio icon in order to adjust any audio there. As you entered, you had the option to call in using your computer or over a phone line. So those are your two main audio options. You can click on participants to see the other attendees for this webinar. And of course, you have your chat box, which is where we're asking you to direct any questions. When you do utilize the chat box, you may have noticed there is a drop down where you can send your chat or your question to everyone, or you can send it just to me, the host of the webinar. So we do ask that you submit your questions through that manner. Everyone is muted on the call here for this webinar, so any questions can be submitted through the chat box. And we will have plenty of time at the end to address any questions. So I won't be going over questions throughout, but at the end we will, again, have plenty of time. So New Entry will be following up with you all with an email. So we'll have a link to an evaluation about this webinar, and we really appreciate any feedback you're able to provide. So your filling out that survey is really greatly appreciated. We'll have a link to this recorded webinar and the presentation slides, and we'll also link to other resources that are mentioned throughout this webinar. So to give a quick overview about New Entry, we are an initiative of Tufts University, New Entry Sustainable Farming Project, and that's our website there. So we do some on-the-ground work here in Massachusetts with farmer training and food access. We have an extensive farmer training program, which includes business planning, as well as hands-on experience in the field through an incubator farm program. We do food access work in the community through our food hub and CSA, which is called World Peas. And we also have a national team that provides support to different food systems organizations, be they other incubator farm programs across the country, or in the case such as the assistance provided by this webinar today, folks that are applying to USDA grant programs. So again, this educational enhancement team grant we received from USDA helps us to support applicants of BFRDP. We have a number of resources that we list on our webpage. So if you go to nesfp.org/BFRDP, you can find different resources and tools there. We developed an online self-assessment tool, which we encourage folks to use to gauge their readiness to apply, which we will be updating along the way during and after this RFA period. We have an FAQ portal where you can see common questions as well as submit your own question, which would be responded by the USDA staff. We'll have webinars like this one and others in the future, and there again is my contact information to get in touch with me directly. So for a quick overview of the Grants.gov process, there's a number of steps along the way, and many of you may have already addressed these with your organization, but just to give kind of a broad sense of the steps here. First, you'll need a DUNS number. Once you have that, you're able to apply for an account through the System for Award Management, or SAM.gov. You'll select an authorized organization representative, or an AOR. And I just want to quickly point out that this is sometimes referred to as the authorized representative, or AR, and those are one and the same. And then you'll apply for your Grants.gov account. So to dive into those steps a little bit deeper, in order to get your DUNS number, again, that's registering through Dun & Bradstreet, and we provide the link here to fill out that form. You only need to do that once. It's not an annual renewal or anything along those lines. It does take 3 to 5 days to receive this number. So, and you'll notice for each of these steps, it takes a bit of time for them to process each step. So you'll just want to make sure you give yourself enough time. And there's no fee to register for your DUNS number. The next step is the System for Award Management, or SAM. And for the SAM system, it can actually take up to 2 weeks if you don't already have your employer identification number. So if you know that that number is something you do not have, then you just want to make sure you're allotting for a bit more time for your SAM.gov registration. This does need to be renewed annually, and SAM.gov is good about sending notifications to the point of contact in the SAM system when you do need to renew. So you should be prompted for that if you are in need of your annual renewal. This again has no fee for registration, but you do of course need your DUNS number first in order to apply. And it's in SAM that you'll appoint an e-business point of contact, or eBiz POC as it's referred to. So that e-business point of contact is the contact to appoint your authorized organization representative, and it's that AOR who then registers with Grants.gov. And one note, you'll definitely want to make sure you have the username and password handy that is associated with your AOR's Grants.gov account. You will definitely need that. You'll be prompted to enter it in order to submit your grant through Grants.gov. So the e-business point of contact confirms the AOR's registration, and once that is confirmed, then the AOR is then able to submit applications through the Grants.gov system. So once you're all set with these various systems and you're ready to go with Grants.gov, it's very important to first start, of course, with the RFA. So I wanted to point you all back to BFRDP's website and where to find that information, which I'm sure many of you have already been accessing at this point. Here on the left side of the screen, you can see the BFRDP website. And then on the right side of the screen is the BFRDP grants page. You'll see there's a link underneath where it says Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program. Towards the top is that program link. And that page, the BFRDP program page, has further resources and information, different documents that can help you with your application process as well. So I just want to make sure everyone's well aware of those resources. But of course, the RFA is located here, which has, of course, your instructions and information that you'll need in regards to submitting your application for this year. So once you do go into Grants.gov to find the proper application for BFRDP, you can search for that in their search bar on the left-hand side by either keyword or the opportunity number or the CFDA number, so different ways to sort of access that. But once you search and find BFRDP, you can select the proper application through here. And I have posted the funding opportunity number at the bottom of the screen, and that information is also, of course, available in the RFA. So once you have found and selected your BFRDP option in that list in Grants.gov, you'll then download the application package, which is a PDF with live links back to Grants.gov. So in order to do so, you'll need a current version of Adobe Reader, which you can access through a free download. And it's also recommended to have a PDF generator or Adobe Acrobat, something along those lines, through which you can compile multiple PDFs into one file and kind of manipulate PDFs in that way. And one recommendation, if you are having any trouble, is to try a different browser. Sometimes something that simple can make for a smoother process in accessing the application. Submit early. So this can't be stressed enough. Grant packages can be quite large, and if you know that you might have a slow internet connection, that can sometimes be problematic. So you just definitely want to make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time to ensure that your application is complete, and if any technical glitches might come up, you have plenty of time to address those and still submit by the deadline. Grants.gov will check for errors before submitting. We'll show you where you can sort of check for errors in your application, but you definitely want to make sure you have time to fix any errors if they are found. So it's recommended to submit at least a week before the deadline. Even earlier is even better, but of course that deadline is December 8th at 5 p.m. Eastern. So back into the Grants.gov system, I just want to point out the different tabs that you'll find once you have selected the BFRDP program. Your main page is the Synopsis tab, and that's where you can choose that or select that link to send any change notification emails. So that's just a way to stay notified if anything does change within with that grant opportunity. You'll have a direct line of information of that nature. Looking at the other tabs, we have version history, then related documents, and then package. And that package tab that I have highlighted in red is where you'll find the application itself and the NIFA Grants.gov application instructions. I'll also point out that under related documents, you can find the RFA there as well. So once you have your application package open, I just wanted to talk briefly about the different places you'll find instructions. So of course, the RFA is your main place to be looking for any instructions about your application submission. And it's good to note that any instructions in the RFA would override other instructions you might find elsewhere. So the RFA is the main place to be looking for that information. In the NIFA Grants.gov application guide, you'll find further instructions there that might be more specific to different, more technical pieces of the application package. And then these instructions here that I have highlighted in the red circle your Grants.gov application package are more generic Grants.gov instructions. So there's kind of like a hierarchy in that way of which instructions to make sure you're following really closely. But the RFA instructions always override the others whenever, if that were to be in question. So I definitely wanted to spend some time talking about the just-in-time pilot. So this, as I'm sure you are aware, is new for the fiscal year 2017 RFA, and it is only being piloted to 2 grant programs. One is the Higher Education Challenge, and the other being, of course, BFRDP. So these are the only programs under which the just-in-time pilot applies, and it means that grantee organizations do not need to submit extra documents for the award until it is determined that the award may be recommended for funding. So the pieces that are not required with your initial application when you submit through this just-in-time pilot are the felony and tax certification form, any pledge letters for matching support, and I do want to mention that your letters of commitment are still required, but it's just the pledge letters for matching that would not be required. Also, other matching documentation and information is still required within your budget, but under just-in-time, those pledge letters don't need to be submitted. As far as subcontract information, the statement of work and the letter of intent to subcontract are not required for just-in-time. You do need to, of course, submit your sub-award budgets, but it's those pieces, the statement of work and letter of intent, that are not required. The year-by-year budget is not required. Instead, you would submit just one overall budget for your entire project period, but those annual budgets are not required for just-in-time. And finally, the current and pending support forms for your key personnel are not required for just-in-time. So NIFA will notify project directors and the authorized representative if just-in-time information is then requested. So you will have 30 days to submit your just-in-time information once NIFA has sent you that notification and request. And it's also pertinent to point out that a request for this just-in-time information does not guarantee that your proposal will be funded. It just means it's kind of moved to the next phase of the review process. So taking a look at the application package itself, this is, of course, a screenshot of the SS424, one of the pieces of that application form. So you'll see that there are highlighted boxes throughout the form, highlighted in yellow and then surrounded with a red box. And so that indicates that it is a required field. So you'll want to make sure all of those areas are completed in order to submit your application. You can check when you do check your package for errors when reviewing your application. Any of these required fields that are not completed will be then highlighted as a section that you need to complete in order to submit. And it's recommended that you walk through the application section of the RFA alongside the NIFA Grants.gov application guide to make sure you're referencing all of the information that you need to ensure that you're completing each section correctly. And then we're taking a look at the budget form. So again, you'll see those highlighted boxes of what is required. Up at the top here, you'll see you can select your budget type. And we'll talk about the sub-award budget in a minute, but you would select either the project budget or sub-award. In terms of the start and end date, since you are submitting a budget for the full project period, your start date would be August 15th, 2017, and your end date would then be August 14th, 2020. I'll also point out that the non-federal columns is where you would enter your match budget information. So here we can see this is the senior key person area of the budget form. you'll enter the different information in regards to salary, and then towards the end, over to the right, you'll see the federal and non-federal boxes. So again, non-federal is where you'll enter your matching budget information. And further down in your budget, these are just highlighting the different areas that you'll want to make sure you complete. You'll notice that there are sections in sort of highlighted in blue, and then the sections that are, the fields are basically blank white. And those blank white sections, it's good to note, will auto-calculate as you enter information. So that's a good place to check back to your budget that you've been working on in Excel or something along those lines, to check back and make sure it's calculating the way that you anticipate. And then further down the line in the budget, of course, your other direct costs. And again, you can see the areas where it will be auto-calculating in your totals. And then finally, addressing indirect costs. It will total your direct and indirect there, and then you have the space for your budget justification and to add that attachment. So here's where we take a look at where to access the subaward budget. On the left side of the screen, you'll see a screenshot of the grant application package, and this is towards the top of the full grant application package. Where I have it circled in red under optional, that checkbox is what you want to select in order to access your subaward budget. And that will bring you down to where you see on the right side of the screen, the subaward budget form. You can click that button to extract the budget form, which will look pretty much identical to your budget that you submit throughout your application, but it will extract a separate PDF where you enter that information for your subaward to then add the attachment on this page. So continuing through the application package, we see in this area there are different uploads where you can add attachments. There's, of course, the project summary abstract, and their BFRDP provides a template for this, which I've linked to here. There's, of course, your project narrative, and then in field 12, other attachments, that's where you would include your letters of commitment. Here in the senior key personnel area of your application package is where you'd enter more contact information about your senior key personnel, and the area to upload the biographical sketch for each senior key personnel. Here on this supplemental information form, this page of the application package is where you'll add or enter the program code name and the program code for the grant that you're applying to. So this would vary depending on if you're submitting a standard grant or an educational enhancement team grant. And it's important that you make sure that those program codes are entered correctly so that NIFA can properly sort their applications that are submitted. And so here I'm highlighting where you can click to check package for errors. And that's essentially Grants.gov going through and ensuring that all of the fields that they have identified as required are in fact filled out. Here's where you can save your application and come back to it at a later date. And the Save and Submit button won't be available until you have completed your application package and it's been deemed error-free, essentially, by Grants.gov. So here is a screenshot of the NIFA Grants.gov application guide and where you can find information about attachment requirements. So it's important to make sure that you're using the correct file format and file naming restrictions and conventions, making sure that your attachments are complying with the 12-point font and 1-inch margins, and just making sure that you're following all of these instructions to ensure a successful application submission. So once you have submitted your application package, there are a series of what could be 5 emails to the project director and or the authorized representative. Within 2 days of submission, you'll receive emails from Grants.gov. One will be a confirmation of receipt of your application, and another will be if your application was validated or rejected. And assuming that Grants.gov validates your application, you'll then receive a notification that the application has been passed on to the agency, in this case being NIFA. So once the application has been passed along to NIFA, you'll receive an email confirmation from NIFA that it has been received, and you'll receive a NIFA notification that the application has been accepted or declined for review. So while there are these notification emails of what to expect in terms of the status of your application, it's important to go back and track your application to make sure that you know where it is in terms of its status along the way. So if you find that you have not received one of the emails that should be coming along, it would be a good idea to, well, actually proactively go to this track your application area of Grants.gov and just make sure that it has been successfully received by Grants.gov and by NIFA. I want to quickly address Workspace, which is a tool that you'll find within Grants.gov. Currently, it is an optional tool that you can use to help with collaboration on your application. In late 2017, I understand it will be the standard submission tool, but at this time it is optional. So again, it's designed to help with collaboration. It allows multiple people to share the application package and is designed with the intention to kind of streamline the process so that if multiple folks are working on an application, you don't need to save and close and then have someone else open the application package. Rather, multiple people can be working on it. One thing to note if you do use Workspace is that all the collaborators that are going to be accessing the application must have a Grants.gov account. So you can't necessarily share one username and password in order to utilize Workspace. And so here are some resources we wanted to make sure and point you to. There are training videos available on Grants.gov, which you can find through this link. Grants.gov offers technical support as well, which can be accessed through that link there. You can also always search for Grants.gov support or Grants.gov training to find those. And if another point of contact would be electronic@nifa.usda.gov for any technical questions appropriate for NIFA. But again, there's also the programmatic contacts, which are listed in the RFA if you have questions that are more around the content of the application. So these are places to go for more technical assistance when needed with the Grants.gov application system. I just want to briefly run through the components of the narrative that you want to make sure to include. And this is taken straight from the RFA on page 17. But of course, you have your introduction, your objectives and outcomes, your approach, your personnel and resources, your plan for outcome-based reporting, and your management and collaboration plan with your partners. And then I want to quickly address for these additional pieces of the application, depending on your application status, you can include a response to previous review, which would be up to 1 page of an additional page in your narrative proposal. And this is available for resubmitted applications only. And just to talk about resubmitted applications versus new applications, that's really a judgment call for the program or the organization that's submitting. If you feel that it would be helpful to your application to have that extra page to talk about the feedback that you've incorporated from a previous BFRDP application submission, and you're submitting a very similar project, then by all means you can submit your application as a resubmission versus a new application. The prior BFRDP accomplishments would apply to anyone who is submitting an application and the PD or PI has been substantially involved in a previous BFRDP project. So it wouldn't necessarily mean that they were the lead applicant, but perhaps like very involved in a past funded BFRDP project. So key considerations, just to reiterate, the 25% match is very important to make sure you have that taken care of. Make sure you know your audience and who exactly it is that you're reaching with your project. In regards to the collaboration plan, of course, partnerships are very important, and ensuring that your partners also have experience with your audience is great to highlight. There's, of course, your evaluation and outcomes, and making sure that you have that solid outcome-based reporting piece. And do your homework. Make sure you know of what similar work already exists, perhaps similar organizations doing work in your area. What is it about your program that makes it unique? And then just in regards to the evaluation criteria of the reviewers, it's very much a holistic review of all of the sections of the application versus one section being much more weighted than another. It's rather more of this holistic view. So again, there's our web page with further resources. We'll be sure to post the recording of this webinar and have information about any future webinars there, in addition to other resources and links to the BFRDP program page. And here again is my contact information, just kristen.aldrich@tufts.edu. And I'd like to go ahead and open it up to any questions. If anyone has any burning thoughts or questions, feel free to send that via chat, and we can see about addressing that. Okay, so let's see here, a couple of questions coming in. Are multi-state collaborations okay? Yeah, I would say if you have a regional focus for your project and folks that you're working with, partners in different states, I think that is indeed okay. Will the presentation be available after this webinar? Yes, it will. We will be sending an email with a link to the recording of this webinar. So you'll get that. Anyone who has registered for this webinar will get that in their inbox. And we'll also post it on that BFRDP webpage on our website that's listed on this last slide here. Let's see, if an application is rejected before the deadline, can it be resubmitted this cycle? It is my understanding that you can submit an application before the deadline, and if you have something, if you refine the application before the deadline is up, that you can indeed resubmit. In terms of whether or not it is rejected, I suppose that would depend on what you mean by rejected. As I highlighted, there's a few different steps along the way where Grants.gov is sort of validating the application, and then NIFA receives the application. So if there's something wrong with the application within that time frame, it's my understanding that you'll receive notification as long as there's enough time to kind of notify you of that before the deadline is up. So in which case you would be able to resubmit. Let's see. Is there a minimum or optimal number of collaborators? I'd say that really depends on the project. I don't think that there's a minimum or necessarily maximum, but yeah, I guess I'll also mention that Jill Auburn, I believe, is on the call and could potentially help us with different questions here.
Yep. Hi, this is Jill. I did just unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Oh, great. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah. So great job, Kristen. I would just say in terms of minimum, the minimum number of collaborators is 2 because eligibility requires a collaborative network or partnership. So you have to have at least one other partner or collaborator. But other than that, I think as you were implying, it depends on what it takes to do the job, whatever number is necessary to carry out a good project. And on the prior combination or prior question, I would just reinforce what you said, which is that people can definitely put in an application, and if they discover an error, they can put in a second application before the deadline, and we'll take the most recent one that makes it by the deadline. And a certain amount of error checking happens at Grants.gov, but it's also, and we will certainly let people know if we catch anything before the deadline, but the best thing is for applicants to follow the instructions in the NIFA Grants.gov application guide that tells them how to go back after they've submitted, how to go back and check the manifest and make sure that all of the attachments are in PDF form, because that's the most common error. Someone will forget to PDF an attachment, and there's nothing we can do about that. It just doesn't even come through in the application if it's not PDF. So folks should go back and check their own applications, check the manifest, and resubmit if they find an error. But we also will do the best we can to trap any of those from applications that are put in soon enough.
Wonderful. Great. Yeah, thank you for that insight. Okay, someone is saying they're confused about the match info with the just-in-time pilot. At this point, are we only supposed to show our match in the non-federal column of the budget, or are we supposed to provide any kind of additional matching definition or description? And yes, so matching would need to go in that non-federal column of the budget and would need to be explained and described in your budget justification. But it's my understanding that is all that is required for the just-in-time submission. Okay. And let's see. Someone's asking if we can explain the difference or how we should know when to assign someone as a co-PD, as a partner who needs to submit a subaward, or as someone who is a collaborator or consultant who is only submitting a letter of commitment. So in regards to assigning someone as a co-PD, I think that would depend on the different folks who are highly involved in your project. So if someone is going to be very greatly involved, perhaps provide some oversight and perhaps decision-making in your project, that would feel appropriate to assign them as a co-PD. In terms of submitting a subaward, I think that would depend on how much you want to include in your budget for that partner, essentially. You know, if it makes sense for them to be receiving a subcontract for a good chunk of expenses, then a subaward would certainly be appropriate. In regards to a collaborator or consultant who would just need a letter of commitment, again, I think that would be dependent on your project and the role of that particular person. If they're going to be very greatly involved in the project, then that might be more appropriate to define them as a key person instead of a collaborator. So yeah, I think it's really level of involvement is key with those distinctions. And regardless, anyone who would have a large part of the project and would be considered more of a partner, they would need to submit a letter of commitment showing that they are indeed committing to serving that role or providing that input on your project. So I hope that addressed your question. Let me know if there's anything further to clarify. Okay, can you talk about how to apply for the 10% de minimis rate? I believe that the 10% de minimis is essentially a default. So if you don't have a negotiated federal indirect cost rate, it's my understanding that you can go ahead and apply a 10% indirect cost rate to your modified total direct cost in that case. It's my understanding you don't need to apply for the 10% de minimis, but I can look into that further and potentially get back to you if you want to follow up with an email, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, this is Jill. I would confirm that. It's for people who don't want to go through the work of establishing an indirect rate. But people can just include that in their proposal, and we'll work out the details with them for those that we recommend. Or if they have questions about that, they can call the administrative contacts that are listed at the end of the RFA.
Great, thank you. Okay, so how can we check on whether our application is a resubmission? If we keep certain aspects of a previous application but change others, at what point is it considered a new submission, and who could help to determine this? So again, it's my understanding that is more of a judgment call for your organization in regards to your project. If your project is essentially the same as one that you had submitted in the past that was not funded, but you have made certain updates or tweaks or changes and certainly incorporated the feedback from BFRDP and made changes in regards to making those edits or making those updates, I would say that could still be considered a resubmission. And again, that gives you the benefit of that one additional page to add into your narrative to address how you have improved your application since you received feedback from the last cycle, from when you had submitted it originally. But if you feel that the project is pretty significantly different from one that you had submitted in the past, and that having that extra page to describe how you've addressed their feedback is not necessarily useful in terms of getting across what it is you seek to accomplish in your project, in your application, then you could go ahead and submit as new. But again, I think the judgment call kind of falls on the organization to determine if they want to submit as a new versus resubmitted application. So another question, in the additional attachments section, we are supposed to upload each PDF individually, not all attachments as one PDF, correct? Yeah, so you would attach, well, for example, your letters of commitment, that would all be one attachment. So you would combine all of your letters into one PDF, which would be one of your additional attachments to go in that field, if that makes sense. So it's one PDF attachment for each needed piece, but within those, there might be some attachments, such as the letters of commitment, that need to be PDF'd all together as one attachment. Is a university or college partner required for education outreach grants, or are other nonprofit groups okay? I'm not sure I understand the question. Would a university or college partner be required for education outreach grants, I think that means educational enhancement grants. I don't believe a university or college is required to be a partner. And then the second half of the question, or are other nonprofit groups okay? Right, so I think the partners on your project could be university or college or a nonprofit or some other kind of entity. It's my understanding there's no requirement that there must be a university or college, for example, as a partner. I think the who your partners are is fairly open. You know, as long as they're providing expertise and are committing to serving XYZ role in your project, that's the main piece of it. Our organization has a DUNS and SAM registration, but only a former employee knows what it is. Is there a quick way to work through such problems? Unfortunately, I don't know the ins and outs of retrieving passwords through those systems, but again, seeing as the registration process takes a little time through DUNS or SAM, I would suggest trying to contact DUNS and SAM as soon as possible. I'm sure they have support folks that can help kind of, you know, find those login credentials that you need. Let's see. If you've had a Grants.gov account in the past but don't have a current SAM, can you use that same account with an updated SAM? Again, I would suggest contacting the SAM.gov and perhaps you can start with the Grants.gov technical support folks, and if they are able to see in your Grants.gov account, identify your SAM account in there, then that might be a place to start to try to address that. Okay, we are exploring including in our application more educational training for youth in school age and creating a regional multi-site apprenticeship program for ages 16 plus. I'm looking at the RFA and sample objectives, and our goals for our youth would not be something like new farm startups. Are youth apprenticeships in line with BFRDP's goals? That is a great question. I know that youth training is not necessarily the main focus of BFRDP. Jill, I don't know if you're still on the call and perhaps able to address that one. Okay.
Yeah, we're here, and I'll jump in because that is a good question that we get pretty frequently. And we do have the occasional project that does a certain amount of youth education, but because our goals for the program are people getting into farming or being more successful running farms, that the target audience, if it's youth, it's definitely those older youth. So, you know, maybe juniors and seniors in high school. And we certainly realize at NIFA there is a whole pipeline of youth, but other programs focus on that longer pipeline. So for BFRDP, long way of saying the primary focus of your project should be people who will get into farming or be more successful running a farm during the lifetime of the project. And if you also do some youth education, like I say, occasionally a project will do that, but that's not our primary focus.
Okay, thanks, Jill. Is it a problem, or will it be looked negatively upon if the PDs and co-PDs are only from one organization? I.e., does it look like we're not collaborating effectively if they're all from one organization? I would say, I mean, certainly make sure that you're involving other partner organizations. As Jill had mentioned, I think 2 would be the minimum to be including, and it would be important to make sure that, you know, you're collaborating in a way that is meaningful with these other organizations, providing input in the project. If your PD and co-PD is from one organization, just the lead applicant organization, maybe Jill, I don't know if you have further insight, but I wouldn't think that would be a problem. But if those partner organizations are providing some, you know, significant role in partnering, that would be good to highlight.
Yep, that's exactly correct, Kristen. It's the nature of the overall partnership more than who gets what title.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is there a penalty for the applicant to include support letters, which would also document a partner's commitment to the project? I mean, you certainly do need to include those letters of commitment, but in the RFA, it does specifically say not to add any other attachments that are not specifically requested in the RFA. So I would advise, if it's not a letter of commitment from a partner or a key collaborator in your project, not to include additional support letters. Okay, so to clarify, a partner can be fully involved but not have a subaward, correct? Or should there be a financial connection to the partnership with grant funds? I believe that they can be a partner and not have a subaward. Yes, that's my understanding. Okay. As a follow-up to the co-PD versus subawardee versus collaborator/consultant question, in the past we have submitted the budget for some partners in the subawards consortium contractual costs line item of the budget so that they don't have to fill out an entire subawardee budget. We can just enter their total budget on that line of the budget, and they don't have to fill out a whole budget themselves. But then I'm not sure why or in which cases we would ever ask someone to fill out the whole subawardee budget, because it is quite an involved process. So I like to ask as few partners as possible to fill it out. So it's my understanding that if you are identifying that you have a subaward, then you need that you would need that subaward budget, of course, to follow and correspond back to that budget line item. If it was contractual costs, for example, that would require, I believe, some documentation of what that contract is. So either way, I believe that there is, added documentation that is necessary. But yeah, defining that line between a subaward budget, when you need to submit the subaward budget versus that, consultant line item, that might be a question best suited for the administrative contacts at NIFA.
And in the meantime, this is Jill. In the meantime, I'll jump in and say, I wouldn't obsess over which is which. I'd say do the best job you can of the whole reason we've gone with just in time into not even asking you for annual breakdowns of the budget is we do want to see where you're proposing money go in your budget and to whom and for what purposes in your budget and budget justification. But if you're recommended for an award, we'll work with you on the details of subawards, subcontracts, annual budgets. So the key now in the application at this stage is to get the idea across to the peer reviewers of this is what the project will do, these are the partners, these are the roles they'll play, and the money should be appropriate to get the project done, but I wouldn't obsess over the details of how it gets represented in the budget.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, good to have that insight. So further clarifying, my question is when we need to have someone submit the full awardee budget and when we can just submit them as a line item, and alternately when we should include someone as a partner versus co-PD. So again, in regards to those more specific budget questions, I might suggest you contact those administrative contacts at NIFA for further clarification questions, but I think Jill may have addressed your question there. But when should someone be a partner versus co-PD? Again, I think that's more of, a judgment and dependent on their role in your project. How big of a role or significant of a role do they have in your project? If someone is considered a PD or co-PD, there are certain sections of the application that you need to fill out for someone that is defined in that role and considered a senior or key person. in your project, but defining those roles, I think, really depends on the nature of what they're contributing to your project. Okay, would private farming or ranching operations that provide training and mentoring in the program qualify as collaborators? I would say yes. That sounds like a perfectly appropriate collaborator. Does the lead applicant organization have to be the PD or co-PD? I'd be inclined to say that, you know, of course, the lead applicant should have a significant role in the project. So it would feel pretty appropriate to have someone from that lead applicant organization as the PD or co-PD. I'm not sure that there's necessarily a requirement in that regard. So I think, again, you know, oh, go ahead.
This is Jill. I'll jump in and say we do expect the PD to be from the applicant organization. So that's the one. But you're absolutely right. Other co-PDs, could be from other organizations, but the primary PD has to match up with the applicant organization.
Okay, great. Good to clarify that. Okay, a state university has a statewide BFRDP grant that lists they have the goal of working statewide. However, we in our far corner of the state have more needs for beginning farmers than they are offering, and we want our own BFR grant, so to speak. It's not overlapping because the university is not really working in our area. Would it be best for us to address this in our application? We could get a letter of support from the university PI. I think that addressing other work that's going on in terms of beginning farmer rancher training in your area, I think it would be good to address that in your application. Just knowing that, you know, NIFA and BFRDP wants to know that you have a sense of what all is going on in your field, as it were, in your geographic area. So I think it could be beneficial to point out, you know, that there are these other organizations or entities, or in this case a university, that is providing some beginning farmer rancher training, but this is the way that your project or program is more uniquely or in a niche way addressing a need in your more localized community. So yeah, I think that would be fine to include in your proposal. And if they're able to provide a letter of support, again, I would just recommend, you know, making sure that you have your letters of commitment from partner organizations. So certainly if they are providing, if they are a part of your project as a partner, then they would definitely, of course, include a letter of commitment. But aside from that, BFRDP is not looking for additional letters of support. Okay, moving along. So another clarifier here, I guess more to mean the lead applicant as in the organization with the Grants.gov account. Is the lead applicant the organization with the Grants.gov account already set up? Yes. If you're the lead applicant, you would need to have that Grants.gov account. Okay, and here's another question. What do you advise is the best way to include testimonials from beginning farmer graduates to show we have history of accomplishment if those graduates aren't committing to a specific role in the proposal grant project? Should we include letters of support from them, or should we just take quotes and put in the narrative? I would say addressing that in your narrative would be the best bet. Again, the additional letters of support should not be included as attachments or anything along those lines. BFRDP has indicated that they don't want those additional letters of support, but certainly in your narrative, that would be the best place to show that you have that history and experience and positive impact on beginning farmers that you are reaching with your program and project. And I believe in the introduction section of the narrative, you'll find where that's explained in the RFA. It alludes to showing evidence that beginning farmers and ranchers were involved in planning this project. So to whatever degree you can kind of provide that evidence of success of having been reaching this audience, I think that would be great to include. So any further questions, feel free to chat them. I think we might be just about concluding here. I'm not seeing any further questions coming through. So again, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help direct you to an answer to your question or to the best person who can answer your question. Again, feel free to check out our website with further resources and information, and we'll be sure to let folks know if further future webinars will be conducted in regards to the BFRDP application process. But certainly you can reach out also to the program staff at NIFA regarding BFRDP. I've always found them to be very responsive, so there's a lot of great resources out there for you. So best of luck with your applications, and thanks so much for attending this webinar. Again, we'll be emailing out the recording and the presentation slides, so you'll be seeing that information come through shortly. Thanks again, and have a wonderful afternoon.